Hello, music fans. Now that August is over, it's time to count down my 10 favorite metal, rock, and prog albums that came out in August 2024. Starting with number 10, which is Meer and their album Wheels Within Wheels. This is symphonic progressive rock with pop, art rock, and indie rock, and a bit of metal influence in there as well. Check out the song Something in the Water for a preview of that album. This is Meer's third album. They're a Norwegian band. And before the release, I heard the single Golden Circle. That got me really interested in checking out this album. The whole album has great, catchy vocal hooks with both a male and female vocalist. It's all clean singing, great harmonies, great composition, and great emotion. For fans of bands like The Deer Hunter and Bent Knee. At number 9, I have Ritual with their album The Story of Mr. Bogd, Part 1. This is progressive folk rock. Check out the song The Three Heads of the Well for a preview of this album. This is the fifth album by this Swedish band led by Patrick Lundstrom on guitar and vocals. This album by Ritual will be great for prog lovers who don't like harsh vocals as well, because it's all clean singing. He has also done vocals on many of the Kaipa albums, including their most recent from this year, which I think is excellent. And I should say Meer's album I'm putting in my excellent tier, and Ritual I'm also putting in my excellent tier. 8 of the 10 albums on this list today will be in my excellent tier, and then the top 2 are near masterpiece tier in terms of my ranking categories. And the story of Mr. Bog Part 1 by Ritual really flew by. It didn't even feel like 45 minutes had passed. At the beginning of the album, I wasn't sold yet by the opening track, but as I got deeper into the album, I got more into it as it went on. It's a concept album with lyrics about a successful businessman who's unsatisfied with his life, so decides to abandon it in favor of exploring and finding the meaning of life. If you're a fan of classic 70s prog bands like Yes and Jethro Tull, but also a fan of the more modern Nordic European prog bands like Wobbler and Chronicles of Father Robin, and of course if you're a fan of Kaipa, you should really like this new album by Ritual. There are lots of nice acoustic guitars on here. It's mostly soft and relaxing music, but there are some moments where it gets louder, more electric, distorted, and heavier, and verges towards hard rock and metal, but never quite gets there. I like how the album ends with an almost Middle Eastern sounding vibe. They use some interesting instruments on here. I checked on their Bandcamp page. They call out that they use bouzouki, mandala, whistles, and the Swedish nyckelharpa, which is a keyed fiddle. I'm looking forward to hearing part 2 whenever that comes out. If that sounds good to you, check out Ritual Story of Mr. Bogd Part 1. At number 8, I've got Tigran Hamasyan and his album The Bird of a Thousand Voices. This is piano-focused and synth-focused jazz fusion with progressive rock, art rock, ambient, pop, metal, and Armenian folk music influences. Check out the song 40 Days in the Realm of Bottomless Eye. He brings light into the soil of evil as a preview. Very long song title. This is the 11th album by the amazing Armenian jazz pianist and composer Tigran Hamasyan. Imagine a jazzy version of Emerson, Lake and Palmer colliding with the syncopation, polyrhythms, and polymeter of djent music like Meshuggah, combined with progressive, ambient, almost new age vibes of Mike Oldfield. And that's what this album sounds like. The album focuses heavily on piano, so will appeal to people who like piano-driven music. A lot of the runtime is instrumental, but there are some vocals on the album. Most of the vocals are female vocals provided by Arani Agbabian. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. But I believe I also heard some male vocals mixed in from time to time, possibly Tigran himself. Some of the vocals are just wordless vocalizations like ooh, ooh, ha, 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 that kind of thing. So it kind of feels like an instrumental album, even though there's probably a few too many vocal moments for it to really count as instrumental. The album is really long, at just over an hour and a half. At first, when it started, I was a bit worried about that run length, thinking I'd get bored of it if it's just piano shred the whole time, but I was very pleasantly surprised at just how much variety and experimentation Tigran Hamasyan was able to bring in while making it feel like the album is a cohesive piece with repeating themes throughout the album. There's 24 tracks on here, and there's a lot of really long song names. Some of my favorites, I mentioned 40 Days in the Realm of Bottomless Eye. He brings light into the soil of evil. But I also really love The Demon of Akan Anatak. So check out this album, The Bird of a Thousand Voices by Tigran Hamasyan, if that sounds good to you. Number 7, Kingcrow released an album called Hopium. This is progressive metal with alternative rock influences. Check out the title track for a preview of this. This is the 8th album by this Italian band, and before the album release, I heard the single Kintsugi. The guitar playing, keyboards, drumming, and vocal melodies reminded me a lot of Leprous, probably around their Melina era, which is my favorite Leprous album. The difference here is the vocals are much lower than Leprous, but I think fans of Leprous will really like this album by Kingcrow. That's why I checked it out. The whole album is just executed beautifully with great catchy vocal melodies, nice atmospheric soundscapes, big keyboards, nice drum grooves, cool guitar parts. They don't get too many points for originality because their sound is a lot like Leprous the whole way through. But they do this sound so perfectly that I still have to put this in my excellent tier, and I'm really curious to go back and hear their older stuff in their catalog because they actually started their band Kingcrow before Leprous. So maybe Leprous actually took their sound from Kingcrow, or maybe Kingcrow sounded different before Leprous and then kind of changed their sound. Or maybe it's just a coincidence that they sound similar and these bands have nothing to do with each other and have never heard of each other. I'm not sure. But definitely check out this album. Another track that I like, other than the title track, Hopium, is the track Night Drive. Definitely give that a spin. At number 6, I've got SJS and his album, A Sequence of Mistakes. This is a neo-progressive rock album with some jazz fusion, ambient, electronic, post-rock, folk, symphonic, and space rock influences. Check out the song Tear Gas, which features Kirsty Foster, for a preview of this album. Now, this is the 3rd album by this Australian. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a band. I guess it's a band, but it's really led by the frontman Stuart Stawman. So the band is SJS. I assume those might be his initials, Stuart Stawman. I don't remember or recall seeing what his middle name is, but maybe it starts with a J. He is an English musician, songwriter, producer, currently based in the Blue Mountains of Australia. This is from his Prog archives page that I got this information. So he's with a style described as genre blending, but with feet firmly planted in neo-progressive rock. The music of SJS just takes in elements from the worlds of post-rock, folk, world music, and modern electronic textures. Stewart honed his studio skills as a London-based sound engineer across the 1980s. Alongside encounters with the likes of David Gilmour, Tears for Fears, and many more, he was in the unique position of watching Talk Talk record a project that would become the stuff of music mythology, their Spirit of Eden album. Inspiration was not in short supply. So now we find him combining the talents of Douglas Skeen from Hemina and Anubis. I really love Hemina, so shout out to Hemina. Graham James from Tram Tracks, Christopher Sulos from Espirito, Flatwound, and Masha's Legacy, and others to create a distinct new voice in contemporary progressive rock. He takes inspiration from Anathema to Zappa, from Talk era Yes to Spirit of Eden era Talk Talk. My impression of the album after first listen is it sounds really beautiful, peaceful, serene. It manages to be sad and melancholic, but also uplifting and hopeful at the same time. If you're a fan of Mike Oldfield, Yes, and Sigur Rós, I think you'll like this as it sounds like a combination of those bands to me. My favorite track on first listen was the opening track Tear Gas, which features excellent female vocals by Kirsty Foster in addition to vocals by Stuart Stallman. It has an odd time signature. I think it was 7 at the beginning when I counted, though it might also change throughout the song. But it feels all natural and smooth. The final song, Blue Sky Born, is an over 13-minute epic of atmospheric beauty, which also features Kirsty Foster. And the 2 songs with her vocals are the best on the album, I think, because her vocals are just beautiful. So check that out if that sounds appealing to you. That's SJS and A Sequence of Mistakes. At number 5, I've got Wintersun with Time 2. This is melodic death metal with power metal, symphonic metal, black metal, neoclassical metal, folk metal, and progressive metal influences. Check out the song The Way of Fire as a preview of this. This is the 4th album by this Finnish band. It's been a long time in the making. It's been 7 years since their last album and 12 years since Time 1. There's some drama online about how long this album took since there was a crowdfunding campaign a very long time ago and no album until now. Now it's finally here. I don't know all the details of the drama, but I've seen some comments, discussions, articles about that. And I'm glad that people who crowdfunded all those years ago have finally got their album now. After a couple listens, I think this album could be even better than Time 1, but it's pretty close. This album has some cool Japanese influences that I don't recall hearing as much in their earlier works. There's both harsh and clean vocals on this album by Wintersun. The guitar playing is amazing. The production sounds great too. The opening intro, Fields of Snow, is a cool intro track with a lot of Japanese influence, but I feel it goes on a little too long as it's 4 minutes long, and it's not really a Wintersun song. It's more so just an intro to set the stage for the album. My favorite track is the second track, The Way of Fire. It's the first real track on the album. I love the fast drumming, the fast guitars, intense harsh vocals, powerful clean vocals, the folk influence, the Japanese influence, and the guitar soloing and the riffing. And I don't usually think of Wintersun as a prog band, but I think they have a bit of prog spirit in them. In the closing track, especially Silver Leaves, it's a 13.5-minute prog epic. So check out Time 2 by Wintersun if that sounds appealing to you. At number 4, I have King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with Flight B741. This is blues rock with psychedelic, progressive, and southern rock influences. Check out the song Field of Vision for a preview. Now, this is the 26th album by this prolific Australian band whose first album dropped back in 2012. So they've been putting out more than 2 albums a year in terms of releases since then. And almost every album is completely different. The band completely reinvents themselves. So going into this album for the first time, I wasn't sure what it would sound like. I did hear some of the singles ahead of time, so I got a little bit of an idea. But you never know because sometimes they do a mixed bag of styles within the same album. But this album sounds most like their album from 2019 called Fishing for Fishies. To me, it's blues rock with a lot of harmonica. My favorite track is Field of Vision because I love the opening riff. It repeats this 11-beat sequence before going into a nice groovy 4/4 blues rock song with excellent playing from all members. The music reminds me of Deep Purple a bit, and I've heard others compare it to other classic bands, and especially classic southern rock bands like the Allman Brothers and Lynyrd Skynyrd, or classic rock bands like the Rolling Stones, or jam bands like the Grateful Dead. It's kind of like a combo of all that with a little bit of psych and prog mixed in there. If that sounds good to you, check out Flight B741 by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. At number 3, I've got Leprous and their album Melodies of Atonement. This is progressive metal with art rock, synth pop, and alternative rock influences. Check out the title track for a preview. Or I guess it's not the title track, it's just called Atonement. Check out Atonement for the preview of this. And this is the 8th album by this Norwegian band, and I just love Leprous. They have to be in my top 40 favorite bands of all time list, and I think they have the potential of rising. Everything they've released after their first demo, Silent Waters, which was a little rougher production-wise, but still good. everything after that has just been a near masterpiece. I think their 4-album run from Bilateral to Melina are all actually just full-on masterpieces, and some of the best albums in progressive metal and progressive rock, like worthy of a top 200 of all time list. I've seen them live, and they put on a great show. And based on the quality of the 3 singles I heard ahead of time, which were Atonement, Silently Walking Alone, and Like a Sunken Ship, I figured I'd be shocked if this doesn't end up in my top 10 albums of the year at the end of the year. I pre-ordered a physical copy based on the strength of those singles. After the first couple of listens to the album in full, though, I did notice a lot of the songs followed a similar formula. They were very samey. They kind of just do these slow burns with soft and then these explosive climaxes. Melodies are great. The powerful climaxes of the songs are always awesome, and Einar's vocals are great, though his voice may be an acquired taste and might sound a bit strange to a traditional pop or rock music listener. It's great to hear him do a scream on this album on the track Like a Sunken Ship, but the album is still 99% clean vocals, so it's still a pretty safe album for people who don't like harsh vocals. The 3 singles that they released ahead of time are probably the best songs on the album. So because of that, this is unfortunately my least favorite release from Leprous so far. Maybe that'll change over time. It's still an excellent album. So like the worst of Leprous is still like better than a lot of bands' best albums. And it's still currently my top 20 of the year, but I was really hopeful this could be a contender for top 10 or top 5, given how much I love Leprous. It's just hard to compare Melodies of Atonement to their other studio albums that are just near masterpiece and masterpiece level. And like I said, maybe it just needs some more time to grow on me. I'll keep spinning it and see if it grows on me over time, or if I start to like it even less. At number 2, I have a near masterpiece by the Aphelion called Nascence. And this is progressive metal. Check out the song Deserter for a preview of this. And both of the albums in my top 2 are by Canadian bands. So this is the second album by this great Canadian band, the Aphelion. And as a Canadian myself who loves prog metal, I always love to mention and support Canadian prog metal bands. The music here by the Aphelion is adventurous, sometimes beautiful, melodic, sometimes quite heavy. The vocals are powerful and wild. It's mostly clean singing, but there is the odd scream for fans of Native Construct, The Kindred, Azure, Loch Vostok, and The World is Quiet Here, which are all very melodic bands, but also very heavy prog metal bands where the vocalist just like really goes for it. So that's kind of what this is. Some of my favorite tracks after first couple listens were Deserter and The Seed of Doubt. Something interesting about this album is while the vocals are really impressive, I can hear some imperfections and reasons why people might not really like them. While the guitar playing is great, it's also got some imperfections that I can hear, some human sloppiness, but it kind of sounds nice to me. It makes it sound like a real band playing live. The production isn't the most amazing or polished for prog metal, but this album is still a great listen. Check out the Aphelion and Nascence. And my number 1 album of August 2024, also a near masterpiece, is by the band Anciients, and it's Beyond the Reach of the Sun. This is progressive sludge metal with death metal influences. Check out the song Melt the Crown for a preview. And it's the 3rd album by this Canadian band, another great Canadian band. And both of these Canadian bands I wasn't too familiar with until I checked out these albums. But if you're a fan of Mastodon and Opeth, you should definitely check out this album by Anciients. It sounds like a mix of Mastodon and Opeth. It's just so good. I had to go back and binge their previous 2 albums as well, which were also excellent. So I've added Anciients to my growing list of favorite bands. And I think I must just love Canadian prog metal. I always love Canadian prog metal bands for the most part. The album is about an hour long, but the version on Spotify is 75 minutes because it has 2 re-recorded songs from earlier in their career, as well as a bonus track. The bonus track's a cover of the Alan Parsons project some other time, done in a prog metal style, which sounds really cool. I like both the original version of that song and this cover. If this sounds appealing to you, definitely check out Anciients and their album Beyond the Reach of the Sun. And that's it for my top 10 favorite albums of August 2024. What do you think of the albums on this list? What are your favorite albums that came out in August 2024? Let me know down below. And also let me know if anything else is coming out soon that you think I will enjoy. Stay tuned to my channel. I'll be talking about my first impressions of new albums as they come out and doing my top 10s at the end of each month, as well as album release radars right before month starts, saying some of the albums that are coming out that month that I'll be listening to. Occasionally I touch on some other topics on my channel, like talking about classic bands or just other topics related to metal, rock, and prog that cross my mind that I want to talk about. Sometimes I do some collaborations with other people. If that all sounds cool to you and you want to keep following me to see what I talk about and get great recommendations for new music to check out, definitely hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for next time. Peace out.